The land that would become New York City was never empty. It breathed with rivers, tides, forests, and people. Long before stone or brick appeared, life followed a steady rhythm shaped by seasons and water. The future city rested on a place already full of meaning. This matters because what came later did not rise from nothing. It rose by replacing something that already worked. The people who lived here were known as the Lenape. They were not newcomers. Their presence stretched back thousands of years. They lived across a wide region that included present-day Manhattan, Long Island, parts of New Jersey, and areas farther inland. They spoke related languages and shared customs, but they were not a single village or ruler-led society. They were many communities bound by kinship, trade, and shared knowledge of the land. This connection shaped everything that followed. The Lenape lived in close partnership with their environment. They moved with the seasons rather than fighting them. During warmer months, many settled near the water. Fish filled the rivers and bays. Shellfish covered the shores. Crops grew in cleared spaces. Corn, beans, and squash formed the base of their diet. These foods were grown together in a way that protected the soil and supported growth. Each choice was practical and tested by time. As colder months arrived, families shifted inland. Hunting became central. Deer provided food, tools, and clothing. Small animals added variety. This movement was not chaos. It followed patterns passed down through generations. Paths were known. Camps were remembered. This was not wandering. It was knowledge in motion. Their homes reflected this understanding. Lenape houses were built from wooden frames covered with bark. These homes were strong but flexible. They could be repaired, they could be expanded, they could be left behind without harm to the land. This mattered later because outsiders would mistake flexibility for weakness and absence for emptiness. One of the most important differences between the Lenape and future settlers involved land itself. The Lenape did not believe land could belong forever to one person. Land was shared, it was used, it was respected. A family could farm a plot for a season. A group could fish a river. Another could travel through. Ownership was tied to care and use, not permanent control. This system worked because everyone understood the rules. This belief would later clash with European ideas of land ownership. Outsiders believed land could be measured, bought, and sold. They believed borders could be fixed. These ideas would eventually cause confusion, anger, and loss. But in this early time, the Lenape world functioned with balance and clarity. The island, known today as Manhattan, looked very different then. It was not flat or open. Hills rose across it. Streams cut through the land. Wetlands absorbed water and protected shorelines. Freshwater springs flowed clean and steady. Forests covered most of the island, filled with oak, chestnut, and hickory trees. The land provided food, shelter, and movement. The shoreline curved inward, forming a deep and calm harbor. Rivers met the sea here in a natural meeting place. The Hudson River carried water far inland. The East River moved tides between bays. The harbor remained protected from strong ocean storms. For the Lenape, this meant trade and travel. Canoes moved quietly along familiar routes. Goods and ideas passed between communities. This geography mattered more than anyone could know at the time. The harbor was a gift of nature that waited for someone to understand its power. That understanding would come later. For now, it was simply part of life. The first outsiders arrived without warning. European fishermen reached these waters early in the 16th century. They came for fish and left quickly. They did not stay long enough to change much, but they were seen. Then explorers followed. In 1524, Giovanni de Verrazzano sailed into the harbor under the French flag. He observed the land and the people. He described the calm waters and the welcoming shore. He did not build, he did not settle. He sailed away. For the Lenape, this moment was unfamiliar and unsettling. They had never seen ships that large. They had never seen sails move against the wind. They watched from the shore as something new entered their world and then vanished. This was the first sign that distant powers had noticed this place. Life continued, but it was not unchanged. The Lenape returned to farming, fishing, and daily routines. Children were raised, elders were honored, stories were passed down. But awareness remained. Knowledge had entered their world. They now knew that people from far away could reach this land by water. They did not know why those people would return. They did not know what they would want. That uncertainty settled quietly over the harbor. In the early years of the 17th century, European powers searched for control of trade routes. Spices, fur, and access to inland markets drove their decisions. Maps grew more detailed, coastlines gained value. Among the places marked with interest was the wide harbor at the mouth of a long river. This river would soon change the fate of the land and the people who lived beside it. In 1609, an English sailor named Henry Hudson entered the harbor while working for the Dutch East India Company. His task was clear. He was searching for a water route to Asia. He did not find that route. What he found instead was something different but powerful. He sailed north along the river that would later carry his name. He saw deep waters, forested banks, and access far into the interior. He saw opportunity. Hudson's journey lasted only weeks, but its impact lasted centuries. He did not build a settlement. He did not claim land in a formal way. He observed and recorded. He noted the friendliness of some encounters and the tension of others. He described the land as rich and promising. When he returned, his reports spread. The harbor was no longer a secret. It became a target. The Dutch understood trade. They had built wealth through commerce rather than conquest. When they read Hudson's reports, they focused on one detail above all others. The land was full of beaver. Beaver pelts were valuable in Europe. Hats made from beaver fur were in demand. A steady supply could bring great profit. This single fact changed everything. Within a few years, Dutch traders returned. They did not arrive as settlers. They came as merchants. Their goal was exchange, not control. They brought metal tools, cloth, beads, and weapons. They offered these items to the Lenape and to other native groups farther upriver. In return, they received beaver pelts. At first, this trade seemed beneficial to both sides. The Lenape valued the new tools. Metal knives cut faster. Iron axes cleared land with less effort. Cloth replaced labor-intensive animal skins. These goods fit into existing life patterns. Trade did not feel dangerous at first. It felt useful. It felt optional. The Lenape had traded with neighboring groups for generations. This seemed no different. But something had changed. The scale was larger. The demand was constant. The goods came from far away. The traders returned again and again. Each visit increased dependence. Each exchange tied the Lenape more tightly to a system they did not control. This shift was slow, but it mattered. The Dutch did not immediately build on Manhattan. Their first permanent structure appeared farther north. In 1614, they built Fort Nassau near present-day Albany. This fort was small. It held traders, not families. Its purpose was simple. It protected goods and secured trade routes. This marked the first lasting European presence in the region. This moment mattered because it changed expectations. Trade posts require stability. Stability requires agreement. Agreement requires power. The Dutch now needed consistent access to land and water. Temporary visits were no longer enough. The idea of staying longer began to grow. As trade increased, pressure followed. Beaver populations declined near the coast. Hunters traveled farther inland. Competition grew between native groups. European demand reshaped old balances. The Lenape were drawn deeper into a trade system that rewarded speed and volume. This created stress inside communities. At the same time, misunderstandings deepened. The Dutch believed trade agreements included land use rights. The Lenape believed they were sharing access, not ownership. Both sides believed they were acting fairly. Both sides believed they understood the deal. They did not. Disease arrived quietly during this period. European ships carried illnesses unknown to the Lenape. Smallpox and other diseases spread through contact. There was no immunity. Entire villages were weakened. Some were lost. This loss reduced resistance and disrupted leadership. It happened without intention, but its effect was severe. The Dutch traders noticed changes. Fewer people met them at the shore. Familiar faces disappeared. This did not slow trade. It increased urgency. With fewer trading partners, control mattered more. The need for a base closer to the harbor became clear. By the early 1620s, Dutch leaders began planning a settlement at the mouth of the river. The harbor was too valuable to leave unguarded. Ships needed a place to rest and resupply. Goods needed storage. Traders needed protection. A small outpost could serve all these needs. Manhattan stood at the perfect point. It controlled river access. It protected the harbor. It allowed movement inland and out to sea. The choice was practical, not symbolic. No one planned a city. They planned a foothold. In 1624, the Dutch West India Company sent families to the region. Some settled on nearby islands and along the river. Manhattan was part of this plan, but not yet the center. That would change soon. The settlement remained small. It depended on trade, not farming. It survived through connection, not strength. By the mid-1620s, the Dutch West India Company wanted clarity. Trade needed protection. Ships needed safe harbor. Goods needed storage. All of this required control. Control required land that could be claimed, defended, and governed. The company did not want conflict. It wanted order. It believed order could be created through agreement. In 1626, a man named Peter Minuit arrived as director of the Dutch colony. His role was clear. He was there to organize the settlement, secure land, and reduce uncertainty. He understood trade. He understood negotiation. He also understood paper. That mattered more than anyone realized at the time. Minuit met with Lenape leaders to arrange an agreement on Manhattan. What followed became one of the most discussed events in early American history. According to Dutch records, Manhattan was transferred in exchange for goods worth 60 guilders. These goods included items such as cloth, tools, and metal objects. No gold changed hands, no money passed between them. This moment has often been misunderstood. It is sometimes told as a trick or a theft. The truth is more complex. The Lenape and the Dutch did not share the same idea of land transfer. The Dutch believed they had purchased exclusive ownership. The Lenape believed they had agreed to shared use. Both sides believed the agreement was valid. There was no single Lenape leader who spoke for all people on Manhattan. Authority was local and shared. The agreement was likely made with one group that used part of the island. This mattered later. It created confusion that could not be undone. The paper existed. The expectations did not match. This gap would shape everything that followed. After the agreement, the Dutch began to build with confidence. They no longer saw Manhattan as temporary ground. They saw it as a base. Construction increased. Fort Amsterdam rose at the southern tip of the island. It was built from earth and wood. Its purpose was defense and order. It protected the harbor. It guarded trade. It signaled permanence. Around the fort, a small settlement formed. It was called New Amsterdam. The name reflected ambition, not scale. At this time, it was a village. It held traders, soldiers, laborers, and a few families. Life remained difficult. Supplies were limited. Weather was harsh. Survival came before comfort. The settlement depended on trade more than farming. Food came from nearby areas and from native trade. Ships connected the village to Europe and the Caribbean. Movement defined daily life. Nothing stayed still. The Lenape remained present during these early years. They lived near the settlement. They traded. They watched construction change the shoreline. Their understanding of the agreement did not match what they saw happening. Access narrowed, fences appeared, areas once shared became restricted. Tension grew slowly. It did not explode, it pressed inward. Small disputes arose, trust weakened. Each side believed it was acting within the agreement. Each side believed the other was changing the terms. Disease continued to spread during this period. Illness reduced Lenape populations further. Loss weakened resistance. Leadership structures were strained. The balance of power shifted without open conflict. The Dutch settlement remained fragile. It lacked strong defenses. It relied on cooperation. This vulnerability shaped behavior. Leaders focused on maintaining peace. They needed trade to survive. They needed stability more than expansion. Still, land use changed. Trees were cut, paths widened, shorelines were altered. The land began to reflect new priorities. Storage mattered, defense mattered, control mattered. The Dutch West India Company governed the settlement with rules designed for profit. Colonists worked under strict contracts. Some arrived as employees rather than free settlers. This limited growth. It slowed development. New Amsterdam remained small longer than expected. This created frustration. The company wanted results. It wanted return on investment. It wanted growth. This pressure would soon reshape policy. For now, the settlement remained cautious. One important decision involved diversity. The Dutch allowed people from different backgrounds to settle. Traders came from various parts of Europe, languages mixed, customs overlapped. This created a community that was varied from the start. It was not unified, but it functioned. Religious tolerance played a role. While limits existed, the Dutch were less strict than other colonial powers. This openness attracted settlers who struggled elsewhere. It also created tension inside the settlement. Order required balance. By the late 1620s, New Amsterdam stood at a crossroads. It had land on paper, it had a fort, it had trade routes. What it lacked was unity. The Lenape felt pushed aside. Settlers felt insecure. Leaders felt pressure from distant offices. The agreement that secured Manhattan did not solve problems. It created new ones. It turned shared space into contested ground. It transformed relationships into boundaries. It replaced trust with documents. By the late 1630s, New Amsterdam remained small but uneasy. The population had grown, yet it lacked unity. Traders, farmers, laborers, and soldiers lived side by side, but their interests did not always match. Supplies were limited. Work was hard. Many settlers felt exposed. They lived far from Europe, surrounded by land they did not fully control. This feeling of vulnerability shaped their thinking. At the same time, relations with nearby native groups grew strained. The Lenape and other Algonquian-speaking peoples had watched the settlement expand. Fields replaced forests. Fences appeared where paths once crossed freely. Access to hunting and fishing grounds narrowed. These changes were not sudden, but they were constant. Each small loss added to resentment. The Dutch West India Company wanted stronger control. Trade profits mattered, but stability mattered more. To achieve this, the company appointed a new director in 1638. His name was Willem Kieft. His arrival marked a turning point. Kieft believed authority must be enforced. He believed order required strength. He believed fear could keep peace. Kieft faced real challenges. The colony needed money. Defenses were weak. The population was scattered. He looked for ways to assert control quickly. One idea stood out. He decided native groups should pay a tribute for protection. This idea ignored existing agreements. It ignored Lenape customs. It also ignored the fact that many native groups had not threatened the settlement. When Kieft announced this demand, native leaders refused. They did not recognize his authority. They had not agreed to such terms. This refusal angered Kieft. He interpreted it as defiance. Instead of negotiation, he turned toward punishment. In 1641, a series of violent incidents increased tension. A Dutch settler was killed during a dispute involving stolen pigs. Another colonist was attacked under unclear circumstances. These events frightened the settlement. Fear spread quickly. Rumors filled the streets. Kieft used this fear to justify force. Many colonists disagreed with him. They warned that violence would bring retaliation. They urged caution. They understood how small and vulnerable the settlement was. Kieft ignored them. He believed decisive action would end the problem. In 1643, Kieft ordered attacks on native camps near the settlement. These camps included families seeking refuge. Soldiers attacked at night. Men, women, and children were killed. The violence shocked the region. What had been tension turned into war. This event became known as Kieft's War. It did not bring peace, it brought disaster. Native groups across the region united against the Dutch. Farms were burned, isolated settlers were attacked, trade collapsed, fear consumed daily life. New Amsterdam was not prepared for war. The fort offered limited protection. Many colonists fled inside its walls. Food shortages followed. The settlement nearly failed. What had been built over decades now stood on the edge of destruction. The Lenape and their allies also suffered deeply. Communities were broken. Lives were lost. Old relationships ended. Trust disappeared. The land that once supported shared use became a battlefield. As the conflict dragged on, dissatisfaction with Kieft grew. Colonists blamed his leadership. They accused him of reckless decisions. They demanded change. Pressure reached the Dutch West India Company. In 1647, Kieft was removed from power. He was ordered to return to Europe to answer for his actions. He never arrived. His ship was lost at sea. His leadership ended without resolution. The war formally ended in 1645, but the damage remained. The Lenape population near Manhattan was severely reduced. Survivors moved farther away. Their presence around the settlement declined. This cleared space for expansion, but at a terrible cost. For the settlers, the war left scars. They had learned that force could destroy as easily as it could protect. They had learned how quickly fear could erase caution. The settlement survived, but it was changed. In 1647, a new leader arrived. His name was Peter Stuyvesant. He came with authority from the Dutch West India Company and a clear mission. He was to restore order, protect trade, and rebuild confidence. He was not gentle in manner, but he understood limits. He had seen what unchecked fear could do. He knew the settlement could not survive another war. Stuyvesant inherited a fragile community. Farms lay abandoned. Trade networks were damaged. Relations with native groups were tense but quieter, largely because many Lenape had moved away from the immediate area after the war. This absence reduced daily conflict, but it also carried loss that could not be undone. One of Stuyvesant's first goals was stability. He strengthened Fort Amsterdam. He repaired defenses. He enforced rules more strictly than before. Disorder was no longer tolerated. This created resentment, but it also created predictability. People knew what to expect. That mattered. He also worked to revive trade. Ships returned to the harbor. Goods flowed again. The settlement depended on this movement. Without trade, New Amsterdam could not grow. Every decision was shaped by this reality. Stuyvesant encouraged farming around the settlement. Land was cleared farther north. Small farms supplied food. This reduced dependence on imported goods. It also pushed the settlement outward. The footprint of New Amsterdam slowly expanded. At the same time, governance changed. Colonists demanded a voice. They wanted protection from company abuse. They wanted local input. In response, an advisory council known as the Nine Men was formed. This body represented settlers' concerns. It did not hold full power, but it marked an important step. This development mattered. It showed that the settlement was no longer just a trading post. It was becoming a community with shared interests. People began to think beyond survival. They thought about fairness and future. Stuyvesant did not welcome criticism. He ruled firmly. He limited religious freedom more than many settlers wanted. Conflicts arose, especially with groups seeking greater tolerance. Still, compared to the chaos before, his rule brought order. The economy diversified. Trade expanded beyond furs. Timber, food, and goods from the Caribbean entered the system. The harbor grew busier. Ships arrived more frequently. The settlement felt connected again. Population growth followed. Families arrived. Children were born. Streets became more defined. Paths turned into roads. A small wall was built along the northern edge of the settlement for defense. This wall would later give a street its name. Daily life settled into rhythm. Work days were long. Nights were quiet. Life remained hard, but it felt possible. That feeling had been missing. The Lenape were now largely absent from Manhattan. This absence was not peace, it was displacement. Their reduced presence allowed expansion without daily conflict, but it erased an older way of life. The land changed faster now. By the 1650s, New Amsterdam had survived its worst test. It remained small, it remained vulnerable, but it endured. The settlement learned that control required restraint. It learned that fear destroyed more than it protected. By the early 1660s, New Amsterdam remained modest in size. Its population was only a few thousand. Its fort was aging. Its defenses were limited. Trade sustained it, but profit flowed mostly to the Dutch West India Company. Many settlers felt overlooked and underprotected. This dissatisfaction mattered more than anyone realized. Across the Atlantic, power was shifting. England sought to strengthen its control over the Atlantic coast. Dutch colonies stood in the way of that goal. New Amsterdam sat between English-controlled New England and the southern colonies. Its location made it a problem England wanted to solve. In 1664, English ships appeared in the harbor. They carried soldiers, they carried authority, they carried a demand. The English claimed the land by royal grant. They ordered the settlement to surrender. Fort Amsterdam was unprepared. Ammunition was low. Walls were weak. Resistance meant destruction. Peter Stuyvesant wanted to fight. He believed honor required it. The settlers did not agree. They feared loss of life. They feared the destruction of homes and trade. They had endured war before. They did not want another. Petitions circulated. Settlers demanded surrender. They believed English rule would protect property and trade better than the company had. Their decision was practical, not emotional. Survival mattered more than loyalty. Stuyvesant gave in. Without a battle, the settlement surrendered. The Dutch flag was lowered, the English flag was raised. New Amsterdam became New York, named after the Duke of York. The change happened quietly. No walls fell, no city burned. The English promised to respect property rights and religious practices. Many Dutch settlers stayed. Life continued with little disruption. Shops reopened, ships returned. Daily routines remained familiar. Power had changed hands, but life went on. This moment mattered because it marked the end of the settlement's early struggle. What began as a trading outpost was now a recognized colonial town under a new empire. The change did not erase the past, it built on it. The Lenape were no longer part of this story. Their displacement was complete. The land that once supported shared life now supported expansion. This loss remained unspoken in official records, but it shaped everything that followed. Under English rule, growth would accelerate. Laws would change. The settlement would expand beyond its walls. The small place that survived fear and conflict now stood ready to grow into a city.